Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The FDA issued new guidance saying dogs should stay at least 6 feet apart from other dogs and their owners outdoors.
Well, Bunky's not having any of that. And I'm sure Hayek isn't either. And kids still want to come up and pet Bunky, and I let them. And I just tell them, wash your hands,
Pets, make sure your pets observe social distancing. But no, this isn't ridiculous. And no, it's not arbitrary, as we talked about earlier in the show. Juneteenth rally in Tulsa, not a problem. Trump rally in Tulsa, problem. In addition to all of the matters on which the experts, including our experts, the Tony Fauci's and the Deborah Birxes of the world, have just been wrong. And I don't blame them for being wrong. This is novel, as we know. And so you're going to convey an understanding, you're going to convey a best estimate, and then you have to reckon with the actual real world results as information becomes more available, as we have more reliable research, as we better hone best practices.
But the mainstream media, they're finding anything to exploit this coronavirus. Like, now, put the toilet seat down before you flush the toilet because it could get, fecal spray in the air. I mean, it's... And then
Fecal Spray was the name of my high school band, actually. It's interesting. We were a Butthole Surfers cover band.
Exactly. But then if you read through the article at the end, it says, there has been no known transmission from this. It's just hypothetical.
Yeah, the best,
honestly,
best
it's called
practices,
panic porn.
Best practices is just to get one of those Michael Jackson hyperbaric chambers and squirrel yourself away in that until Tony Fauci says it's okay to come out. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Anthony DiMauro. He is a contributor to Young Voices and a philosophy major at NYU. Oh, boy. Oh, no, philosophy major here. We're going to have to go through at least the neo-existentialists before the interview's over. Anthony, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me so much. I appreciate it.
And so you write in the AmericanConservative.com that you were a COVID warrior. You were out there telling people what time it was and how they should be living their lives, and now you feel a bit foolish about it all. Why?
Well, I feel foolish because as we've witnessed the whiplash in advice given from the WHO and the CDC, I also, in my advice, experienced that same whiplash. I often got myself retracting the same advice I was suggesting to people weeks before. I mean, the issue is when I looked at the ongoing situation, and really it was the health experts signing on about the lack of risk when protesting that did it in for me, because the health advice shifted with the politics. It suggested that and again, this says nothing about the politics or the causes of the given protests, but how is it that Georgia is experimenting in human sacrifice for opening up, but protesters shouldn't even take the risks of coronavirus into consideration before joining millions in the street? It just feels like gaslighting. Again, it says nothing about the politics of the protests themselves, merely that there's a hypocrisy in diagnosing the seriousness of the virus depending on the atmosphere. The real phrase that epidemiological risk does not disappear in the face of potential political gain. That's the biggest fact. And living your life by the advice that the WHO has been giving is a recipe for disaster. Yeah. I've come to that conclusion.
Anthony, I have to tell you, I'm with you 100%. I was so brainwashed and paranoid about COVID. I started stockpiling food the second week of February. I was wearing masks before anybody was. I'd wear gloves here at the station and wear a mask while I was working with Dan. And now
Amy was patient zero for lunacy.
I was.
Yeah.
No, and you know what got me? I was watching all these videos daily that were coming out of China, and people, put in body bags, and then the body bags were moving, and like bodies were everywhere, and then, so what started you brainwashing you with COVID to become a COVID warrior? Was it the videos from China, or what was it?
Yeah. So I mean, it's tough because actually, even looking back on the original WHO reports coming out of China, those are even inconsistent. Although that is probably what started it for me. Similar to as you were explaining, all the videos coming out of China, and by January 30th, the WHO declaring it a global pandemic. That sounds serious. To be honest, the virus, I'm not going to downplay the seriousness as such. I mean, 100,000 people have died. But the issue is, even let's go back, like I said, to January. The WHO claimed that there was no human-to-human transmission of the virus January 14th. Again, 2 weeks later, it's a global pandemic. You might not expect truthfulness to come out of China, the same government that keeps Uyghur Muslims in a concentration camp underground. But the WHO, that had 22% of its funding from the United States, was supposed to be different. It's not supposed to be a political entity. I had no reason at the time, I didn't think, to mistrust it. But of course, as I looked at the conflicting, advice, everything from downplaying the seriousness of masks so that others could have access to it, and all the way to asymptomatic spread isn't a threat anymore, or it is. I don't know. Of course, we don't know. So things like that, like I said, it really started, like you said, with the China videos coming out and the WHO declaring a pandemic, without me really knowing any reason to mistrust that information.
And so, what about those who you were communicating with when you were a COVID-19 warrior versus their reaction to what you're communicating today? What's happening at NYU or virtual NYU in terms of your friends and colleagues?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like when I was giving that advice at NYU, most took it very seriously. There was no question about it. But really, I think the biggest difference you could see is actually between the advice I was and the conversations I was having with my father in January versus the advice I'm having with my father now. I'm still in New York. He's in New Hampshire. But at first, he always had, some suspicion about how serious, how to handle this. And he always took everything with a grain of salt. And I was like, well, that's because you're in New Hampshire, much less contact, a lot lower density of population out there. But now when I talk to him and I explain, hey, you know what, you were right. Masks, common sense do work. I remember trying to explain to him how the masks didn't work, and because that was the advice of the CDC, and I felt, and looking back on that, it seems so ridiculous. And likewise, all these various protest confabulations between, this is a risk to public health, but this isn't. He has a good laugh at that.
Yeah,
especially considering.
Good thing. Good thing your dad wasn't listening to his punk son telling him what time it was. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've been around the block a couple times, Anthony. You go ahead. I know, Mr. Smart Guy, Mr. Philosophy major at NYU is going to tell the old man how the world works. Okay. All right. Sure. Speaking of that, we have to get in a philosophy question or two here. Let's see your
let me
chops.
go first.
See how good NYU is. Why is there something rather than nothing?
Oh, very good. Well, that assumes that you can know that there's something at all. Look at Parmenides. He told you that, if it's not something, it doesn't exist. So either you don't exist or you do.
All right. I'll get. One line is fine in response to see how good you are in terms of the advancing the dialogue.
I've got one.
Was Nietzsche right that God is dead?
I tend to think that we live in a pretty godless age, not an irreligious one. Not an irreligious one. I think if you look at a lot of the sort of religious fervor behind a lot of ideological movements on the left, in part on the right, but certainly on the left, you see a lot of religion. Maybe not a lot of God, but a lot of religion.
Sure, Tony Fauci is our new God, to the extent that we're not our own gods, of course. Absolutely. Oh, Amy, you had a philosophy question.
May I get
sure,
in here?
Yeah.
Do guns protect people or kill people?
Oh, that's a good one.
The duality of guns. That could be your master's thesis.
Yeah, something like that. Well, the issue is, and I hate to, again, hit the philosopher. It depends on the situation, right? You have to look at the details, in what circumstances was a gun garnished, and where was it pulled, and how was it, what was the intent of the shooter? All those questions come into play. So I guess I'm going to give you the non-answer of it depends on the situation. But
No, that's
I'm
all right.
overall I'm pretty pro-gun when it comes to the idea, less contact with police, more gun ownership. That's sort of my mantra, I think.
You're well on your probably not with that position. I was going to say you're well on your way to being a philosophy faculty member at NYU or a politician. You're probably with that view you just expressed. I don't know if you're going to make it onto a college campus or into public office in New York. So you may have to move back to New Hampshire.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see if my zip code stays the same. We'll see how many years that happens.
He is Anthony DiMauro, writer, researcher, contributor to Young Voices, and philosophy major at NYU. Anthony, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're awesome. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
I like people. It's why I got into HR. And I like liking people. So even when Kate drops 1,000 resumes on my desk, or when 3 new hires start on the same day, I don't stress. I've got it covered with Bamboo HR, the easy-to-use HR software platform that makes it easy to manage our